So what if I told you the entire video game industry was nearly saved by a failed Popeye game and an angry landlord? So Nintendo didn't begin with magic. It began with desperation. Long before Mario, before barrels were thrown and kingdoms saved, the story of a company that almost didn't make it. This isn't just history, it's an underdog story. It's the rise of an empire built not just on pixels, but persistence. This is the unlikely rise of Nintendo.
Let's go!
For decades, it survived by the skin of its teeth. The company lurched from one business experiment to another, clinging to relevancy, while bankruptcy loomed closer than anyone cared to admit. So by the late 1970s, the writing was on the wall. Nintendo was running out of ideas, out of time, and nearly out of money. But just as the curtain seemed ready to fall, fate tossed the company two unlikely lifelines. But before I get there, we have to go back to playing cards in late 1800s Japan. No coins to collect, no worlds to save, just the ancient city of Kyoto and a dream. Nintendo's story began in 1889, not with pixels or power-ups, but with hand-painted Japanese playing cards that became wildly popular. Fusajiro Yamauchi founded Nintendo Kopai, creating these really elegant cards that offered a legal yet thrilling alternative to gambling in 19th century Japan. And it wasn't just the birth of a company, it was the opening chapter of a legend. But success, as we all know, is a fickle beast. And apologies in advance for my Japanese pronunciation throughout this video. I'm gonna do my best. So Hiroshi Yamauchi, the grandson of Fusajiro, took over the company and wasn't afraid to take risks. And unfortunately, most of those were questionable at best. They were floundering until a brilliant young engineer named Gunpei Yokoi invented an extendable, grabby thing called the Ultra Hand. And suddenly Nintendo realized something profound. Toys are fun, people like fun, let's do more of that. The Ultra Hand sold over 1 million units, and Yokoi went on to create more gadgets, including the Love Tester. Nintendo once sold a device to measure how much you and your crush like each other. I don't know if that's adorable or awkward. But then, in 1981, Donkey Kong happened. And originally intended to be a Popeye game, licensing forced Miyamoto to create his own characters. It was chaotic, it was brilliant. And Shigeru Miyamoto, with the imagination of a child and the determination of $100 in a candy store, created Donkey Kong, a game about a giant gorilla kidnapping a woman. Fun fact, Jumpman, the hero of Donkey Kong, got his real name Mario actually after a rent dispute with Nintendo of America's landlord, Mario Segale. Mario's popularity skyrocketed, and Nintendo doubled down in 1983 with Mario Bros, where Mario and his brother Luigi battled turtles and crabs in the sewers. The game was a huge hit, but the best was yet to come. In 1983, Nintendo dropped the Famicom, or as the West would know it, the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. It was sleek, it was powerful, and it was the cure for the video game crash of 1983. Sort of. The video game market had collapsed due to an oversaturation of really low quality games, most infamous of which being the E.T. game on the Atari 2600, becoming just a poster child for failure. Nintendo sought to really rescue consumer confidence with its infamous Nintendo Seal of Quality. It was a gold stamp indicating that the game had met certain standards. And the seal wasn't just a gimmick, it was a promise. The NES was packaged with innovative peripherals like the Zapper, Light Gun, and Rob, the robotic operating buddy, aimed at sort of marketing the console as more than just another video game system. Super Mario Bros. Became the crown jewel of the NES, bundled with the console and offering a really immersive side-scrolling experience unlike anything players had seen before. And suddenly, parents could trust what they were buying, most of the time. By the time production ended in 1995, the NES had sold over 61 million units worldwide, making it one of the most successful consoles of all time. But the NES wasn't just a console. And Mario went from a pixelated character to a household name. And Super Mario Bros. Became the anthem for an entire generation. But Nintendo didn't stop there. Zelda, Metroid, Kirby, they were cranking out legends like it was no big deal. And Miyamoto described Zelda as a game inspired by his childhood adventures exploring forests and caves. It wasn't just a game, it was a journey. Then came the 90s, but before the console wars could really heat up, there was a dramatic twist behind the scenes. So in the late 1980s, Nintendo began working with Sony to create a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo called the PlayStation. PlayStation with a space. The plan was simple. Nintendo would get a CD-based system to compete with Sega Genesis's add-ons, and Sony would supply the tech. But just before the official announcement of this partnership, Nintendo stunned the tech world by partnering with Philips instead, effectively ghosting Sony in front of an entire industry. And Sony, both insulted and inspired, was determined to go solo. The result? The original Sony PlayStation, released in 1994, which would go on to become one of the best-selling consoles of all time and Nintendo's fiercest rival. Meanwhile, Sega was throwing shade.
What Nintendo?
Which was a big ouch. Sega wasn't just talk. The Genesis, or Mega Drive outside of North America, was a sleek, faster console with a more rebellious attitude. Sega's mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog, was everything Mario wasn't. Fast, edgy, and kind of dripping with 90s cool. And Sega marketed itself to an older demographic, positioning Nintendo as a kiddie console. But Nintendo hit back with the Super Nintendo, or SNES, released in 1990 in Japan and then 91 in North America. It was a 16-bit powerhouse that brought richer graphics, better sound, and more complex gameplay to the table. And with its library of instant classics, the SNES wasn't just about entertaining, it's about creating worlds that players could get lost in for hours. And by the mid-1990s, Nintendo had firmly reestablished itself as the king of the console world, even as competition heated up. It went on to sell over 49 million units worldwide, solidifying it as one of the most beloved consoles of all time. But the best was still to come. Who could forget the Nintendo 64? 3 handles on a controller, 3. I don't know what we're supposed to do with that third one. No one really knew. We just rolled with it. And released in 1996, N64 was Nintendo's first foray into 3D gaming and featured groundbreaking graphics for its time. Super Mario 64, well, not my favorite game, wasn't just a game, it was a seismic shift for the gaming industry, setting new standards for 3D platformers and showcasing the potential of fully realized 3D worlds. With its open world levels and precise control, it set the gold standard for 3D platformers. GoldenEye became a cultural phenomenon, defining the first-person shooter genre on consoles and turning the couch into multiplayer all-out war zones. However, N64 faced really stiff competition from Sony's PlayStation, which offered more third-party support, used CDs instead of cartridges, allowing for larger games and full-motion videos. But despite this, N64's innovative gameplay and unforgettable library left an indelible mark on the gaming industry. By the end of its production run, N64 had sold nearly 33 million units worldwide. And while it didn't match the commercial success of its predecessor, it remains a beloved console for its pioneering contributions to 3D games and its unforgettable catalog of first-party titles. And as time went on, Nintendo kept innovating. The GameCube, adorable but underappreciated. So released in 2001, it was Nintendo's first console to use optical discs instead of cartridge, but opted for a proprietary tiny baby disc format rather than standard DVDs. Small, colorful, and came with a convenient carry handle because I don't know, doesn't want to take their console for a walk. But despite its charm and actually processing power compared to the PlayStation 2 and Xbox, the GameCube struggled to compete in a market dominated by those rivals. Nintendo lost third-party support due to limited disc capacity and lack of DVD playback, a feature its competitors boasted, but still delivered a slew of cult classics and groundbreaking titles. Games like Metroid Prime reimagined the beloved franchise in first-person 3D. Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker stunned players with its cel-shaded art style and oceanic exploration, even if it was divisive at first. The GameCube may not have won the sales war, but it won hearts, becoming a nostalgic gem for fans and a very critical chapter in Nintendo's legacy of bold choices. And despite its memorable game library, the GameCube sold only 21.7 million units worldwide, falling short compared to its competitors, the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox. But by the early 2000s, Nintendo was at a crossroads. So the GameCube had struggled to capture a wide audience. The competition with Sony and Microsoft was getting fierce. But instead of joining the hardware arms race, Nintendo made a bold pivot. They decided to focus on innovation and accessibility rather than raw power. It wasn't about processing speed or high-definition graphics. It was about changing the way people played games. Enter the Wii. The Wii's motion-sensing Wiimote transformed living rooms into tennis courts, bowling alleys, and fitness studios. It wasn't just about gaming. It was about movement, laughter, and shared moments. Nintendo tapped into something that transcended traditional gaming, bringing families together, making gaming accessible in a way no console had before. It wasn't just fun, it was a whole party in your living room. And Nintendo's plan paid off. The Wii sold over 100 million units worldwide, making it one of the best-selling consoles in history. And it wasn't all gimmicks. Games like Super Mario Bros. Galaxy, The Legend of Zelda, Twilight Princess, Metroid Prime 3 delivered a top-tier experience with really imaginative design and really immersive gameplay. Now, it definitely struggled at times with third-party support and HD graphics, but Nintendo had cracked the code on mass appeal. It wasn't just a console, it was a movement. And after all the success the Nintendo Wii had, they had to figure out what was next. How would they capitalize on the Wii's success to set the company up for the next 5 to 10 years? Enter Nintendo's biggest swing and miss in a while, the Wii U. Probably their most misunderstood console. So released in 2012, it was intended to build upon the massive success of the Wii, but it stumbled hard out of the gate. The concept at least seemed promising. You had a tablet-like gamepad that could display a second screen, allowing for unique gameplay mechanics and even off-TV play. Unfortunately, poor marketing left consumers very confused. Was it an add-on for the Wii? Was it even a new console? Even seasoned gamers weren't entirely sure, and the name didn't help either. Wii U sounded like a minor update rather than a brand new generation. And really, despite excellent titles like Super Mario 3D World, Pikmin 3, and Bayonetta 2, the console never really found its audience. The Wii U sold only around 13 million units globally, making it Nintendo's worst-selling home console. But here's the twist. The failure of the Wii U planted the seeds for Nintendo's comeback. And then in 2017, Nintendo changed the game. The Switch. It was designed to combine the best of both worlds. The power of a home console and the portability of a handheld device. Detachable Joy-Con controllers, a sleek docking system, and really seamless gameplay transitions between modes, the Switch was exactly the innovation that Nintendo needed. And the launch title, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, was a bold reimagining of the franchise that earned universal acclaim and helped define what that console could do. Super Mario Odyssey followed shortly after, offering one of the most inventive platforming experiences in years. Then came Animal Crossing: New Horizons, which exploded in popularity during the pandemic, becoming a social lifeline for millions. And beyond first-party hits, Nintendo made strides in improving third-party relationships, attracting big-name franchises like The Witcher, Doom, and Skyrim to its hybrid platform. By 2023, Switch had sold over 130 million units worldwide, making it one of the best-selling consoles of all time. And its appeal spanned all demographics. Game families, casual players, and Nintendo sort of longtime fans alike. It wasn't just gaming, it was a lifestyle. And the Switch proved that Nintendo did not need to follow the industry's rules to win. In fact, it might have saved the company from a dangerous downward spiral. The hybrid console success revived faith in the brand, re-energized its fan base, and delivered the kind of financial and cultural victory Nintendo desperately needed at the time. It only needed to follow its own path. And there's so many more chapters to Nintendo's story, from Game Boys and other handhelds, but that's probably its own video. And as of 2025, anticipation is building around the successor to the Switch, the Switch U. Kidding, obviously it's Switch 2. And at about $50, it's not just an upgrade, it is a statement. A declaration that Nintendo is done playing catch up. Let's be honest, the original Switch was revolutionary, but it was running on fumes by the end. Blurry texture, stuttering frame rates, games that wanted to be great, but were bottlenecked by aging tech. The fans loved it anyway, but we all felt the strain. But this time, it's powered by a custom NVIDIA chip with DLSS support, meaning games look sharp whether you're docked on a 4K TV or playing handheld on a layover in Denver. Performance is smoother, load times are snappier, and the battery life at least shouldn't be a cruel joke anymore. One of the biggest upgrades, backwards compatibility. least mostly. A lot of your existing Switch titles will carry over, with noticeable improvements in visual and performance for supported games. While a few older titles didn't make the jump, Nintendo made the transition smoother than most, letting players bring much of their library along for the ride. Don't forget, revamped Joy-Cons, a redesigned rail system, and improved stick mechanisms, sort of finally allowing Nintendo to address the elephant in the room. No more random drifting mid-jump or on a platform or kind of unintentional moonwalks in your fighting game you're on. Switch 2 isn't trying to outmuscle the PlayStation or the Xbox. It's just trying to do its own thing and doing it exceptionally well. Again, because if there's one thing Nintendo's good at, it's zigging when everyone else zags, and somehow making us want to follow. The original Switch wasn't just a commercial hit, it was a cultural movement. It blurred the lines between console and handheld, attracted everyone from toddlers to grandparents, and Nintendo pulled out of the Wii U era fog like a warp pipe to redemption. And for the Switch 2 to reach those heights, Nintendo's going to need to do what it does best. Delivering unforgettable first-party games, embracing quirky ideas no one else would dare to attempt, and somehow making old franchises feel new again. The original Switch saved Nintendo. Switch 2, it might just redefine them. This isn't about teraflops or tech specs. It's about Nintendo finally removing the weight from its own wings and seeing how high it can fly. The one thing we've learned over the past decade is this: Nintendo doesn't follow trends. They flip the script. They jump first, and they land on the flagpole with fireworks.
It's so nice.